Van Nuys, the city that was sold in an afternoon. Well, sorta. Not literally, but that's the way it was described in the LA Times after a highly successful and heavily promoted land auction that occurred in 1911. Imagine hundreds of people hopping on a train from downtown LA to visit the middle of a dusty field out in the boonies with the promise of a free barbecue and an opportunity to bid on plots of dirt in farm country. And that's how Van Nuys was born. But behind what was a seemingly innocent event, organized so the public could witness the groundbreaking of a new town and have the opportunity to grab a piece of this new community, lay a shadowy real estate speculation conspiracy, years in the making, involving city officials with inside information, newspaper moguls, an ex-mayor, railway titans, and LA's most powerful business elite. And their plan? Well, it was to use inside information about the city's biggest ever infrastructure project, the Los Angeles Aqueduct, to buy up real estate on the cheap and flip it for a fortune once the water came in. What followed is arguably the largest organized real estate speculation conspiracy in Los Angeles history, and a scheme that inspired movies like Chinatown and turned this dusty patch of land into the beating heart of the San Fernando Valley, and Van Nuys was ground zero for the entire thing. Before we get into this story, we should back up a little bit. Yes, Van Nuys was officially founded on February 22nd, 1911, but long before the streetcars and land auctions, this area had been home to the Tongva people for over 8,000 years and was a cultural crossroads with at least 4 native languages spoken in the area long before farmer and rancher Isaac Van Nuys came through with cattle and wheat. See, around 1870s, Isaac Newton Van Nuys, the man, the myth, the wheat farmer, bought a massive chunk of the southern San Fernando Valley and used it for ranching and dry farming wheat. Around that time, the valley had very little water except for some wells that had been dug, and really no real growth except for some scattered farm communities in the area. Just acres and acres of mostly raw land. Here's one of the first known photos of the area in 1873. And by the year 1900, Van Nuys and most of the San Fernando Valley still looked like this: open, dry, and largely undeveloped. The population of LA was hovering around 100,000, and there was just one big problem standing in the way of serious growth, and that was water. The issue was this place was seriously dry, and unless someone found a way to pipe in water from somewhere else, the valley wasn't going to become anything more than just a large cow pasture. And that's where the Los Angeles Aqueduct enters the story. Built between 1908 and 1913, the LA Aqueduct was the brainchild of William Mulholland, the city's water czar and resident engineering genius. It stretched over 230 miles, bringing fresh water from the Owens Valley all the way to Los Angeles. It was the most ambitious and expensive municipal project in U.S. history at the time, but here's where it gets a little shady. See, while the city of LA was covertly securing water rights from unsuspecting farmers way up in Owens Valley, a small group of well-connected insiders knew what was coming, and they saw potential to make a killing. And this is where the San Fernando Syndicate comes in, a not-so-secret society of old-money Los Angeles power players, where you had Harrison Gray Otis, the publisher of the LA Times, basically the original media mogul, Harry Chandler, Otis's son-in-law and future LA Times publisher, Moses Sherman, the streetcar king, Fred Eaton, ex-mayor and water scheme mastermind, and of course, William Mulholland himself. Together, these guys weren't just rich, they literally made LA, and weren't afraid to use their influence in government, the press, and public infrastructure projects to make land investments that would explode in value. And like any good scheme that needs a front operation, they formed a shell company, the Los Angeles Suburban Homes Company, to quietly buy up over 47,000 acres of land in the valley from Isaac Van Nuys and others, all before the public knew the aqueduct was happening. Insider trading? Kinda, but illegal? Well, not at the time. So when the aqueduct project was announced, the syndicate was already sitting on a gold mine of prime real estate. It's almost like they knew something was up. And in 1911, they leveraged their publishing reach with the LA Times to advertise a groundbreaking event for a new town site rising from the dust, complete with a free train ride, free barbecue, and a real estate auction that sold out practically in a day. The outcome was so successful that the LA Times called it, quote, the beginning of a new empire and a new era in the Southland. And boom, Van Nuys was born. You do have to give these guys credit on how sophisticated this grift was, and although extremely unethical, what they were doing at the time was legally in a gray zone. I mean, the early 1900s in the US were still the Wild West when it came to regulations on this sort of government corruption, but I couldn't think of a more solid scheme. They had the power and inside knowledge to not only greenlight and direct huge public infrastructure projects, they also had the capital to invest heavily in these areas and were about to benefit exponentially from it, and then the means to advertise and manipulate the public opinion through the press. It's actually a really impressive operation that has pretty much all angles covered if you think about it. By 1915, Van Nuys officially voted to be annexed into the city of Los Angeles, sealing the deal and allowing access to all that sweet aqueduct water, in turn enabling development across the entire area. So how much did the San Fernando Syndicate make in all this? Well, some had more cash to dump into the operation, but it's said that they bought land for as little as $10 to $50 an acre. And after the aqueduct opened, in addition to the completion of their own railway lines and newspaper hype, it's reported that they sold the same land for 10, sometimes 20 times that amount. This was real estate flipping before HGTV and on a massive scale. And it wasn't just the real estate that they profited off. They also had a near monopoly off future infrastructure projects like the railways and utilities, all while shaping how the city expanded. So did they ever get busted? Well, the answer is no. They didn't even get a slap on the wrist. And this is because what they did technically was legal at the time, although ethically questionable, but this was the Wild West of real estate. And their legacy, you can still see it today. In the street names Chandler, Sherman, Otis, Mulholland, these weren't just developers. They were city, and some might say empire builders. Now, if you've seen Chinatown, you already know the theme. Shady water deals, land grabs, corruption, and the San Fernando Syndicate is the real-life inspiration behind the noir classic. And Van Nuys was ground zero for the whole thing. Or should I say, the first test to see if this whole scheme would pay off. And it did, becoming the blueprint for the development that would be used throughout not just the San Fernando Valley, but the entire city of Los Angeles. The formula was simple. Buy land on the cheap based off inside information, control the narrative, bring the water and the infrastructure needed for population growth, and sell the land for sometimes as high as 20 times what you paid for it when it was time to develop. Van Nuys wasn't just a new neighborhood, it was the prototype for the modern Los Angeles sprawl. As the great French novelist Honoré de Balzac once said, "Behind every great fortune is a great crime." And while what the San Fernando Syndicate did may not have been a crime at the time, their fingerprints are still all over the city. Just follow the water and the money.